Hi, Janine. How are you today?
I'm great, Gayle. How are you today?
I am fantastic. First off, just thanks for taking some time to chat with me a little bit about your career, the path you've taken, what you're doing now, your views on, leadership and stress and workplace culture. I'm hoping we can just have a conversation that covers a whole bunch of topics.
That sounds wonderful, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about.
I know that your career has taken some pretty interesting paths. How did you end up in HR?
Yeah, I love to share my story about that because most of my career has been in the life science space, so pharmaceutical, agriculture, consumer health. But predominantly, it was in the pharmaceutical space. I was on the commercial side. I started as a sales rep, market research, and moving into marketing. Ultimately, I ended up overseeing one of our divisions for general medicine. I loved it. I loved my role on the commercial side. I loved the strategy piece. I loved working with customers and working with the team members and truly just delivering our full selves and our passion towards what we do, and that's for patient care. Around 2018, I started to get a little bit itchy in terms of where am I going next, and what am I going to do after after this stint as a BU head. And frankly, I was totally interested in just stepping away from commercial and doing something completely off course. I've always been passionate about all things HR, and um, love the opportunity to work on things like team dynamics and organizational design and leadership and all of those wonderful things. So I thought, well, maybe I'll make a little pivot and go to HR. I was approached when my predecessor left the organization to see if I wanted to throw my hat in the ring, which I said, yes, please, and went up against, internal, external candidates and was afforded the opportunity. So in August of 2018, I made that career pivot and started in HR, and um, it was an incredible first few months. We talk about the learning curve. It was a steep learning curve because I did not have formal HR background, but I had the leadership, which is what was needed for the team at that time, and learned so much as I went along. Thankfully, I had a team of experts who could do the HR piece. And together, we built a phenomenal team. We increased our engagement scores. We were able to bring so many new initiatives to the organization, including major transformations, and doing that with intent and purpose to make sure that the employees felt respected, employees felt supported, and the business was supported because ultimately that's why we're there. We're
Yeah,
there to help with the business. So, yeah, that's how I got there.
that's an interesting path. I'm sure brought an interesting perspective,
Mm.
having not had a more traditional HR trajectory, right? To come into an HR leadership role from a different perspective.
Yeah, you know what? That's absolutely true because I was able to come in without having any history in terms of, formal HR experience and look at it from the lens of the business, look at it from the lens of an employee versus an HR professional. And both are needed, both are required. But I think that was something that truly helped in determining and fast forwarding to these accomplishments we were able to do for the business is keeping that business lens in mind, keeping the employee lens in mind.
That makes a lot of sense. And now you've kind of taken maybe not so much, I guess, of a pivot this time. It's more along, sort of extended that path a bit. Um, Tell us about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I am no longer in the corporate space. I've opened up my own consulting and coaching firm. It's Janine Pajot Consulting. I work with senior executives on one-on-one basis and helping them to advance their leadership skill, their leadership style. Something I'm doing a lot of work in right now is that executive branding. And I work primarily with women. And I love to do this because we have so much to offer. It's our job. And when I say ours, you, me, society to make sure that there's an opportunity for women to really develop in their own leadership style versus following a framework that it's probably more male dominated and male centric. By bringing in true vulnerability, true authenticity into your leadership style, it propels an organization and propels a team like you could never imagine. So I'm doing a lot of that work, which I absolutely love.
Well, that's fantastic. One thing I read fairly recently was a study that was done by Robert Half that was looking at burnout rates. And I thought it was interesting because this study showed that both legal and HR professionals reported the highest rates of burnout. And so I'm curious, I know you talk about things like stress, and when you look at issues like that, how do you help leaders understand those issues for their employees and what they need to do to address a burnout and heavy workload and a high emotional toll, right? Especially HR. I mean, it's an emotionally charged position to be in.
Yeah, I think I can address some of that with reflection when COVID hit and we had to work from home. Everything shut down, basically. And that is probably one of the most striking moments where HR really was put into the spotlight. And what are we going to do during this time where there was no playbook? No one had the answers. Yet it was the HR department that everyone went to for the answers. So I think something during that time, and myself included, I was impacted by the stress that came with that moment in time, working crazy hours and everything. And it wasn't until I took a moment to step back and say, we've got to rework things. Otherwise, my team is going to suffer through this because everyone was putting in 24/7. It really came down to a few things. And I'm not saying this that's very simple because it's not, but to try and bring it back down to the basics. We need to prioritize. Pre shutdown, yes, we had many projects to do. We had some things in play on our scorecard. We had to take that and start at the very beginning. What are the priorities we're going to focus on today and what will it achieve for what we need now? And by prioritizing, whether it's in a time of crisis like COVID, just in your everyday, it sounds so easy, but I find so few teams and leaders actually sit down and really truly look at what matters today. Because, what matters today will also drive the future, but you can't do everything at once, right? Rome wasn't built in a day.
No.
You've got to take a look at those priorities. So it did that with the team. That helps to kind of just level set everyone. The other piece too was to start talking about the fact it's okay not to be okay. We're all dealing with different things. Some of my team members had young kids at home, trying to balance that. Others had parents they're trying to care for, and.
Yeah.
So really embracing the vulnerability that we were all facing at that time. Myself included, I came to terms with my own mental health that I had kept secret for a very long time. I dealt with depression my adult life, my teens, never showed it, never shared it.
Wow.
But I started to share my own journey. And I felt for myself, selfishly, it was cathartic. It was to be able to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And that had a trickle effect within my team. And then ultimately, as I shared it with the larger organization, that vulnerability is a strength.
Yeah.
Asking for help is a strength. And also just being a bit of an empath with your colleagues, picking up on the fact, hey, Gail, how you doing today? Like, how you
Yeah.
really doing? And not accepting the first fine.
Right.
Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say prioritize being okay with being vulnerable. And because I always like to say, you may not be having a bad day, but somebody else is.
Yeah.
So if we can just learn to ebb and flow as a team, we can get through anything. And, ultimately that's what we did.
Yeah. I really like that. And I can see the importance of that vulnerability that you're talking about. And it kind of leads into the next thing that I'd like to chat about. Something that's a real passion for me is workplace culture.
Mm.
Because I think what you're talking about, when you as a leader are willing to show vulnerability, are willing to be a bit more open, willing to share your ambitions as well as your fears. I think that goes into creating an overall culture. And where I come at it, the legal side, lawyer in me background, when I think about workplace culture, I'm thinking about that connection between compliance and culture, right? And I think a lot of people tend to think about legal compliance as a check the boxes exercise, right? Here's these things we have to do. Okay, have we done them? To me, there's a real connection between the way you approach it, the way you view compliance as fitting with your values, and how that contributes to building a workplace culture you want. Just to kind of give an example, if you were finding out about legal obligations that you have from your employees, it's an employee that comes and says to you, well, hey, actually, you're not supposed to be asking me for a medical note anymore. Or actually, instead of 2 days off for bereavement leave, I'm supposed to have X in this province that I'm in. I think that says something too about the culture you're creating, right? When you think about workplace culture and you think about the role both of leaders in creating and building and modeling that culture. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts on where compliance, the unsexy legal stuff, where do you see that fitting in when you're looking at how do we build an organization that has everything you'd want it to have, right?
Well, if it's okay, I'd like to answer it a little bit in reverse.
Sure.
If I think about the compliance piece,
Yeah.
to your point, Employment Standards Act, pay equity, all of these things, they're vitally important in how they apply to culture because, well, first and foremost, it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Paying your people properly is the right thing to do. Ensuring people aren't being harassed for who they are or where they come from, that's the right thing to do. So if you're looking at it from a checkbox exercise, you're missing the point that these laws are in place to protect basic rights. So for me, that is kind of the cornerstone of culture in a workplace is what is the right thing to do? What is the right thing for the business and the right thing for the employees? And with leadership understanding that without your employees, you don't have a business, you have a sole proprietorship, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because then you're just trying to do it all on your own. And don't get me wrong, I worked in business my whole career. I get it. Results matter, but it's not at the expense of people. It's through people, it's with people.
Yeah.
So the leaders who are solely focused on the bottom line, I feel miss an opportunity to create a workplace that people want to stay, they want to thrive in. I've coached some folks along the way who feel that they have no choice in the matter when it comes to where they work. It's like I've got to take it because it's a paycheck. I have no other options. And where I'm going with this is there's always options.
Mm-hmm.
There's always options for employees. Do not take them for granted. And most certainly do not try to worm your way out of doing what is right. I know when I see articles where an individual was let go in such an egregious fashion, and I remember just reading, I think it was last week, a gentleman of 33 years was just let go, no severance, nothing, and he was on medical leave. Help me understand where the integrity is on that decision. So now I don't want to get into your business because I'm not a lawyer. So I don't know all the
No,
background
but
to
yeah,
that. But it just goes back to the right thing to do.
it's an interesting point you raise. I really like that because I think you are right. It is the right thing to do. But I do think that in a lot of ways, and you made this sort of connection, the right thing does often tie into the good business decision too, right? If you really want to focus on that, so employees have options. It costs a lot of money to hire and train employees. There's other good practical reasons to be doing the right thing. It's easier to bring in good employees, keep those employees, and grow that way than dealing with constant turnover because you're a place that people just don't want to work. It says a lot, right? You can say all the words you want about the kind of culture as an employer you want to have, but if the actions don't fit, you don't have that. It's hard to say we're an employer that values our employees and cares about their safety and their well-being when, to your point, it turns out that there's a number of basic legal obligations that they're just not meeting. Your words and your actions are not aligned.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then in terms of sort of that leadership role, taking it back to when you talk about vulnerability, do you find that a lot of women leaders probably have this feeling almost of needing to go the reverse? If I want to be a leader, I actually can't show any vulnerability because that's how I need to succeed. That's how I compete against, my male counterparts. Do you think that's still the case? Do you see that as when you're working with women leaders?
Yeah. I think it still exists. And I'd be curious to do some sort of a study in terms of if you're newer in your career versus those who have been in their career for a while. I'll just speak for myself. I'm in a certain season, a point where I don't care anymore versus when you're newer in your career and you're trying to fit that mold.
Yeah.
But if I just think of my own experience, how many times early in my career I wanted to just be more me, yet it would be shut down or criticized that, you know, you're emotional or you put whatever other adjective is in there. So I still believe that this is a road that women still need to overcome. A man loses his mind in a board meeting. He's not seen as aggressive. He's just being assertive.
Yeah.
Whereas if a woman did that, well, she's emotional, she's aggressive, she's too much. So it really is the double sword. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that men don't have to deal with um, their own challenges when it comes to leadership and breaking out of a mold.
For sure.
I think it's just, with women, it's a bit of a tougher climb um, to overcome. I think for overall, when I talk about vulnerability in leadership, it is not just for women. It is for men too. When I have observed male leaders who have come from being this is the facade, to actually opening up to more of that authenticity, I don't have all the answers, you could see the shift in the respect for that leader in the organization. I've witnessed it firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what really got me thinking. It's like, wow, he's an incredible leader. He's been doing this for years and years, had this facade, but over time shifted himself through his own growth. And it was just phenomenal to see, and to see the organization just blossom under that type of leadership.
I think to me, it goes back to in any of these organizations, it's all about people. People are the foundation. And I think we do relate best to people who are showing their authentic self. I can relate to you because I know who you are. Versus having artificial walls constructed. When we allow ourselves to open up, and that is a change in leadership style, creates a different environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're seeing someone that is human. You're seeing someone who deals with challenges just like you do. It just creates a different energy within the organization, and one that I truly believe creates greater respect for each other, not because of title, but because of people,
Yeah.
because of being human. I think we have a long way to go, though, in order to build these type of leaders. That is part of my mission. That is part of why I opened my practice.
Yeah.
Is I am on a mission to bring greater vulnerability into leadership, and vulnerability is a strength. And when used correctly, it has incredible power, way more power than someone, wielding
Yeah.
saber.
I like that. With what you're doing now, what do you love the most about what you're doing? Whether it's a particular kind of experience, a particular part of your day, a particular sort of success. What is it that kind of makes you go, yeah, this is what makes me feel good?
Gosh, what a great question. There's so many things. I think probably one of the biggest ones is seeing the shift in a client who has realized they had everything they ever needed right within themselves. And what was standing in their own way was themselves. And I'm sure we can all relate. We have these feelings of self-doubt, and when you really just take some time to unpack it, unlock it, it's been there all along. It's a little bit like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, the little shoes.
Right, they were there all along. That's right. Just didn't know how to employ them, right? I think your story, your your whole sort of trajectory, it's pretty
Oh,
crazy,
yeah.
right? I'm sure in that moment, like you said it yourself, I don't have that specific skill set, but I bring the leadership to it and confidence in my own leadership skills to rely on my team, those subject matter experts, to rely on them to do their job, to empower them to do their job in a way that is going to help us all get through this together and as a team.
Yeah. Trust is huge, right? I came into this team. They knew me as the head of the division, so I had to earn their trust.
Yeah.
And I did that from the outset, just kind of sharing what I value, my expectations. I value open communication. So I expect that as well too. It's not like I want you to do this, I lead with that kind of approach, and with humor as well too.
You've got a great sense of humor.
The trust is really, really key.
Yeah.
And be okay if it doesn't work out. You might put your faith in someone who you thought was an expert, and then, it comes to pass that maybe they're not actually in the right role,
Yeah.
and you put them in that role. You learn, right? And you move on. But to go into a new role as a leader, expecting from yourself that you should know everything,
Mhm.
that you should, you know, have all the answers or what have you, then you're really just setting yourself up for failure and self-destruction, because that will eat away at you.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
We
it's
learn, we fall, we get back up.
getting comfortable with failure. And seeing failure not as a something always to be avoided, but as a learning opportunity, and to sort of accept that, failure is a part of life. I'm curious, in your work with other leaders, are there particular areas where you sort of see the biggest challenge? Is it very individual, or are there certain buckets where you're like, we've got some gaps? We need to be thinking about how we address these more systemically too.
Yeah, I would say a few things that have been trending up, and this does speak with my work with female executives, is this idea that you have to over prepare over everything. It's not enough to have that rough draft and just run with it. I need to know 40 other slides that are sitting in the back deck that will never be shown, just in case I get that one question.
Yeah.
There's the over preparedness. There's the confidence piece of just, speaking out and giving an opinion. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Just say it. And I see it a lot with female executives. which when you do this repetitively can lead to burnout as well too. You
Yeah.
are always just trying to be perfect. And again, who's perfect?
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
perfect?
Certainly. I was going to say that sounds a bit like a perfectionism kind of, striving for perfectionism. And if that's the standard you set, you're just going to burn yourself out. And alternatively, you're also just not going to accomplish as much. If your goal is perfection and you're not able to move forward until you hit that, you can get pretty stuck. Perfection's the enemy of
It's
the good.
true.
Good enough is good enough sometimes, but that can be a hard thing to be comfortable with. For
For
sure.
sure. And it ties back to workplace culture as well. If the workplace culture is that you've got to be spot on, you can't make a mistake, mistakes are forbidden, and there's some sort of a consequence to failure,
Yeah.
then that it all works together. If you're about to make a large presentation to a board,
Hmm.
and you of course be prepared. You got to know your stuff. That's just cost of entry. But what happens if they ask a question and you don't know the answer?
Yeah.
Is that the end of the world?
Yeah.
And you say, I don't have that right at the top of my head, but can I come back?
I was going
Been
to
there,
say, I've got
been
my
in
own
those
examples.
moments,
Yeah.
right?
Do you,
But yeah.
you made a comment earlier about stage of life, stage of career. I think back when I was an articling student, right? As an articling student, we would get sent to do, certain motions in court. So we would still often have to speak to them and be prepared to answer questions from the judge. And I remember exactly that. We never could have billed for the work that was done, but I remember going on a motion that was literally I was going to get up and be on my feet for, I don't know, 5 minutes is probably even too long. But the time I spent being sure that first of all, thinking through what is every single question that a judge could ask me, right? So not just what are the answers, but what is every question I could be asked, and then what is the answer to every single one of those questions. All to stand there and probably, 9 times out of 10, not even be asked anything. There's being prepared, and then there's taking it a lot further than it needs to go. I can say I've learned from that, but it's taken a long, long time. I do think as I've gotten much further along in my career, I am more comfortable now with the idea of, you know what, I don't have that answer right now, but I will get back to you on it, as opposed to feeling
Mhm.
the need to everything. I get what you're saying, right? Yes, be prepared, but there's a line between being prepared and going so much further to a point where it's really sort of diminishing returns. You're creating more stress for yourself. You're taking more time to do something out of fear of not being perfect.
The mindset is huge. That's a whole other podcast.
This has been fantastic. I do love talking to you about everything related to HR and leadership and culture, because you really do bring a more broad perspective. You've got the business experience, you've got the HR experience, the human element, right? You've been open about your own struggles and your own vulnerabilities, and the way that you talk about these things, it's really eye-opening.
Well, thank you. I could chat with you on these topics all day long. It's always a treat.